Well, coming up on Currently, we'll get uncomfortably close as we discuss the ins and outs of being in the end-of-life business with Art Bukowski. Plus, Beth has updates on Safe Harbor, a potential plan for 14th, and Frankie, and a new festival centered around food coming to TC this summer. Welcome to Currently, where we cover some of the top local stories directly from the journalists who are covering them. I'm your host, Crystal Frost. Now, today we will discuss what happened this week with two amazing Northern Michigan journalists. As always, Beth Milligan, the head writer for Traverse City Ticker, is here for episode 14 of Currently.
Whoa.
I can't believe that.
14?
I know, and coming back
We're
for
a
his...
teenager.
I know, we're like a little bit weird and awkward at this point, right?
Gangly, very gangly.
We're a gangly show, folks. Coming back for his second appearance, the jack of all things journalism, Mr. Art Bukowski. How are you, Art?
I'm all right, and I've got my business news.
I love
I
it.
like telling everybody about it.
This podcast was recorded on Thursday, May 8th at 5 p.m., so things may change by the time you're watching or listening. And before we start, we have to thank our generous lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, located on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. It's home fashion elevated. Plus, we can't forget West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you're not just choosing a bank, you're choosing a partner that's committed to the well-being of our community. You can visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. And finally, the Coin Slot Arcade Bar in Traverse City. Love the Coin Slot. They have a full bar, pinball machines, all in a low-key setting. All right, friends, let's see here. I have to say right now, I just have to do a shout-out for where I was today. Look at my T-shirt.
Career
Fantastic. Yes. Quick minute to shout out that I just volunteered at an incredible event, My Career Quest at the Traverse City Civic Center. Now, this is an event that's put on by Northwest Michigan Works and Networks Northwest. It brings dozens of employers, like, I don't know, over 50 maybe, to the Civic Center. Hundreds of 9th grade students from the 10-county region are bussed in, and they actually get to just try out employment, right? So if you want to be like, hey, you ever use a nail gun, Johnny? You can nail things. I don't think it's a nail gun, but there's so many things you can do. The Elmers was there, and they had these dump trucks, these like remote control dump trucks, which were super fun for the kids to try out.
Fun.
And every kid ends up like putting on scrubs and like going back to the bus. It's the funniest, coolest thing ever. So if you're looking for something cool to do, how to get involved, I would recommend you go to your local Michigan Works Service Center and ask about how you can get involved, because if you volunteer, you get a sweet, sweet T-shirt.
I like the color. It's like a seafoam.
I know. It's like a minty
minty.
seafoam.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, love that. It is another jam-packed show today, so I'm super excited to do that. And I also, just want to kind of get into this and give a little bit of a notice that we are going to be talking a little bit about death, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I have to say that I know you wrote about this, Art, and that this is something inevitably that we're all going to have to deal with at some point in our life. And as I've entered into my mid-40s, I'm still saying mid-40s, even though I'm on the other side of mid-40s, I'm finding that I'm seeing death from differing perspectives. Like, namely, I'm seeing my own parents aging, and they're entering their final chapters. And you're thinking about, like, okay, what is the next step? And then, I'm kind of experiencing grief before it happens, because you start to see your parents, not be able to do the things they used to be able to do. You have the awkwardness of talking to aging parents about their final wishes, which honestly can be a little awkward.
Yeah.
And you also, even have conversations about talking about their abilities now.
Yeah.
When you start to talk to your parents about, are you able to drive? Is that something you should still be doing? That can all get a little awkward.
Yeah.
In this end of life stuff. And all of the time this is happening, you're also realizing your own mortality, right? And you're like, I'm middle-aged. That's a weird
Not me.
place
I've
to
been young
be.
forever, but maybe the rest of you.
You're never gonna die. Well, it is weird. I mean, it's a weird place to be.
Yeah.
You're taking care of kids oftentimes. You're taking care of older adults oftentimes.
Yeah.
And, you're starting to think about what comes next. And you spoke to a lot of people for this story that's in this month's business news.
Yeah, it was a big one. I got to give credit to Beth's boo, Joe, because that's where this whole idea came from. We had this really interesting lady come to town for the writer's series, Alua Arthur, who's a death doula. And essentially what it is, and it's fascinating to think about. These have been around in some capacity for a long time, but I would say over the past 10 to 15 years, they've really become a formalized thing. And it's just putting all this energy into helping you move to the next chapter. And if you talk to these death doulas, they'll tell you about, we put all this energy into bringing a life into the world. There's all this emotional energy and medical energy and all this stuff. What about leaving?
Yeah.
In these death doulas, people say, well, you already have hospice. Well, hospice is mainly medically focused. These death doulas are more spiritually focused, but it's more than that. It's the loose odds and ends, business dealings, all kinds of stuff like that. So there's a lot of overlap with a lot of these things, between an estate planner and a death doula and hospice or whatever. But the point is he got me going on that. And then this thing was like literally layers of an onion, So I start talking, well, I got to include the funeral homes, right? I need to talk to folks at hospice. And then somebody tells me about Jamie Kramer, who's got this really interesting business working with the dunes out there. And somebody's like, well, you got to talk with Michael's place, the folks. So it became this kind of this big, a huge story with a lot of different layers, but I thought it turned out well because there's so many different things to think about for the person who's dying, regardless of what stage they are, if it's close, if it's far off, for the folks that are left behind. So it was an interesting examination of the businesses and organizations in town that deal with death and dying, essentially.
Speaking of the death doulas, I know, Beth, that you went to that National Writer Series, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
It was very poignant. And Alua and Dana Black, who hosted that, talked a lot about just a lot of issues. Again, the topic that kind of is going to affect you and affect everyone.
Yeah.
But then really digging into, when that time comes, especially if it's coming, like someone who has a terminal illness, how you make amends at the end of your life or tie up not just your business loose ends, but your family, personal, spiritual loose ends. It was a great event. And I think what's cool, and we'll let Art maybe talk more about the story too, but Art always likes to say the Traverse City Business News isn't just for business people.
For sure.
And this is an example because this is a topic that literally everyone is going to have to deal with, like you said, Christal.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned a couple of different avenues when it comes to these businesses at the end of your life or maybe your aftercare. And you mentioned an organization that is near and dear to my heart. Michael's Place has been around for a couple of decades now. Amazing organization that really helps people deal with their grief. And one thing that Mindy was quoted in your story talking about, which is it's sometimes the awkward and uncomfortable, sometimes disenfranchised grief that maybe comes with people who are dying by suicide.
Oh, yeah.
Which again is another layer of this, of the grief aspect and of a business or organization trying to help people navigate that, which is extremely difficult.
Michael's Place does a really good job of understanding that everybody's dealing with somebody who died, but it's so different if you have a child who dies or a spouse who dies or somebody who dies suddenly or by suicide, and they have different groups for that. And it really, really makes a lot of sense that they have those things separated out, because if you think about it, it's and so many things like this in life are like this, where it seems similar at first blush, but then if you really look at experiences that people have, they're very, very different. And they're tugging at different emotions and they're poking different things. I think one of the things that was the most interesting about this story was, and I can't really stop thinking about this, is that it really speaks to the world we live in now, where there are an overwhelming variety of choices for anything. So it used to be 30 years ago, if you died, you got cremated or you were buried. That's it. And now if you want to be a coral reef, if you want to be shot into space, if you want to be decomposed, depending on the certain local laws, you can't do this stuff everywhere, but there's an overwhelming variety of things to do with anything in life. And it's fascinating because it speaks to so many things in our society about, now kids with travel sports and the bazillion different streaming shows. We're just inundated with all of these different choices. And this story was an interesting examination of that in a lot of different ways. There's just more social infrastructure and choices to anything in life. And the funeral thing really made me talk about that. Another interesting side note in that was we were talking about the Michigan has been a heavy cremation state for a long time. Certain states have not been for certain religious reasons, but there's a lot of other things that go into play in that too. For example, people are more mobile than they used to be. They're transient. So you don't grow up in a town anymore. And Tom Bensley, the former sheriff, had a great quote that I still love. When I first time I sat down with him years and years ago to interview him when he was running for sheriff, I said, "So you're from Traverse City?" He said, "Yeah, I was born at Munson Hospital, and I'm just working my way across town to Oakwood Cemetery.
Wow.
It's great. But the concept of that is here's a guy who was born here, he's going to live his career here, he's going to die here, he knows it, and that's the thing. That's very rare now. People are scattering like dust in the wind, so there's even less of a connection to a place in terms of a cemetery, which is another thing that's led more. But the point is there's just there's an overwhelming variety of choices for anything. And this story, I think, really takes a look at that for folks.
And one thing I would say, I think that's really beneficial about a story like Art's is in the journalism world, we get a different introduction to death because oftentimes as a reporter, sadly, you're going to be covering it a lot. Homicides, accidents, natural disasters, whatever it might be. And oftentimes you're talking to someone, sometimes just minutes after they've lost someone or witnessed an accident or whatever it might be. And so, you start to get a sense of your own mortality as a journalist. Like, for example, I don't let anybody ride a motorcycle if I can in my life because I've just covered so many accidents. But the other thing that you see when you do that over time is you just realize, especially in our Western cultures, we don't talk about death very much and we don't plan for it and think about it. Yeah. So it's already going to come with the difficulty of that separation or the shock or whatever, because it's usually not expected. But then add on top of it that we don't often give people the language or the tools, and all of a sudden they have to figure out everything from someone's password on their phone or computer to their will or their estate. And so I think stories like Art's are really helpful because what I know from talking to death doulas, including, Alu at the Writer Series, when she was here, is that planning, and she even does meditations where people envision their own death and sort of deal with that emotional aspect of it, is even if you just take care of the practicalities, giving people language and tools to think about the future often sets them more at ease now, to be able to live and know that things are going to be taken care of if they do happen to.
Well, Reynolds Yankov had an interesting thing that they have a huge pre-planning business. They have 2 full-time people there that literally just do pre-planning consulting. So you'll go in at 45, and Lindsay, one of the funeral directors over there, was telling me we have like 200 individual choices that you need to make for the average funeral.
Oh my gosh.
We come in and pre-plan. You can tell me exactly what you want to do, and when we come and we have a pre-planned client, I'm like, boy, this is just a dream. And they're like, just think about this now. But I think that the point that Beth is talking about too that's really interesting is that it's about control, and it's about controlling your own destiny too, and knowing that your loved ones are going to be set up. You are also taking ownership in this next phase. And obviously this can't happen for everybody. Some people die suddenly,
That's
but
important.
There's a lot of aspects of taking that control, and instead of just letting it happen, making these conscious decisions that put you in a good spot to be at peace and ready to move on.
Communication seems to be kind of a common thread in all of this. When you're talking to the different people in these sort of end-of-life businesses, I mean, how important in their mind is communication, of having those conversations with your friends and your loved ones?
It's big. I mean, you have to be able to talk with folks. And again, it's death in particular is one of those things that you just don't know when it's going to come. You don't know how it's going to come, but we do all know that it is coming. Yeah. So the more you can get out in front of it and have those conversations, the better everybody else is going to be. And I think the other thing that was really eye-opening to me in this was learning about hospice, because a lot of folks have a lot of misconception about hospice, how it works, when it's involved, when it comes in. And there's a lot of really talented and really dedicated people that work in hospice, and they'll talk to you about it's not the misconception they're dealing with is that it's giving up, and it's not that it's giving up. It's prioritizing different things. It's prioritizing, really enjoying that last bit of life. It's saying I'm no longer going to be dragging myself through chemo and these aggressive, invasive procedures. I'm going to enjoy the last bit of my time. There's even studies that show that people that enter hospice end up living longer. Not all the time, but they do because they've just shifted their mindset. So there was one of these things that's fun about being a writer is you go in, not necessarily with preconceived notions, but you go in not knowing anything, and you talk to all these people and you learn so much. And this was one of those types of stories where it's just like, wow.
I on the subject of death doulas, and I know we talked about that quite a bit already, but I'm so fascinated by this. And as you said, there's so much effort put into bringing people to the world, and doulas are a big part of that. Yeah, I had doulas, and I think it's such a special big part of that. And we have a mutual friend who is actually making sort of their way to becoming a death doula right now, and I remember wondering. And you touched on this in your story, that how do you know that is, sort of a career path or even just a path for you? Yeah. And the answer really is, do you find yourself at peace?
Lewis said that, and she was like, basically, because she's now in the process of training a lot of people. She has an organization that's training folks. There's other people. Again, this wasn't a profession 10 years ago. It was informally, but now it's like a formal thing.
Yeah.
And she basically said, if you've ever found yourself giving or gaining peace with somebody who's passing, like, that's you, man. Like, you're a death doula. So, like, you can pursue that if you want. And I came to talk to several folks in town. There's the other funny thing about a story like this is there's so much that you just can't even get to, even with a 4,000-word story, because there's so many layers to this. But, I ended up finding that there's several in town that are pursuing their training. A lot of folks that are already in the business, like maybe they're in hospice and they want to have this extra training, and other folks that have absolutely no connection to it professionally already, but know that it's something they could provide value in. And it's
I mean, what an honor. If you've ever been, I had an experience with my grandmother where I was able to be in the room.
Yeah.
And she was in hospice, and it was just, I felt so honored to do that.
Well, think about the enormity of a human life, which is the other thing that I think about a lot, which we could do a whole other side podcast on. But the fact is like everybody is made up of all of these thoughts and experiences and memories, and every life walking around is this gigantic, enormous thing if you think about it. And to help that life end in transition, I mean, it's just awesome. I mean, that's just so cool to be able to think about everything that makes a person wrapped up in this person that is now going to be transitioning out. And
truly fantastic. I mean, it's such a good story. And I have to say, I mean, we didn't peel back the onion enough to talk about this.
This is one of those ones where I thought it was going to be a certain length, and somebody's like, well, you got to talk to so-and-so, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Oh, boy.
And it's so worth it. So, I mean, you can go online. You can get the Traverse City Business News at tcbusinessnews.com. You can pick up the hefty paper copy.
Like Horizon Books and other places.
Horizon Books,
town.
most of the Shell gas stations. If you go on the TCBN website, there is a list of spots to get it. And Beth's right. I always like to tell folks that it's just, there's so much content in there that it's just barely tangentially business related. And I think there's a lot of good stories that folks would enjoy if they got past the business headline.
Fantastic publication that you can subscribe. It can go to your house.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Most of our people are subscribers. Most of the folks that get it are subscribers, offices in town, individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
It has a pretty limited newsstand presence.
tcbusinessnews.com for that. Highly recommended. We're going to take a break and tell you a little bit about our main sponsor, which I'm super excited about. But before we do that, I have to say we're going to be kind of switching gears in the second half of the show. And Beth, you've had a number of high-profile stories in the last few days that we're really going to touch on. So we'll be continuing with the news roundup in just a few. But I have to ask you to ask yourself, when is the last time you had really good sleep? Like the kind of sleep where you wake up feeling refreshed, feeling like, even a different person, like $1 million.
2009.
I was going to say, I was looking at Art's tired face as you said that.
I mean, if you're like me, I think the older you get to, you find yourself tossing and turning at night, maybe barely getting any sleep. And you think about a lot of things when you are not sleeping. But are you thinking that maybe you need a new mattress?
I might.
Because you might need a new mattress. And why not try to get a new mattress from, in my opinion, one of the best places, if not the best place in town to look for mattresses. Now, sleep is essential to your health and your livelihood and your quality of life. So making sure you're not settling for a bad mattress is a good idea. You spend, if you're doing your life right, about 8 hours a night sleeping, right? I mean, I don't know if either of you get that.
I do. I don't think Art does. So he has 2 little children. So.
But you want a comfortable mattress. You don't want to wake up being like, what happened? What happened in the night? Why am I all sore? You want to go to Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings because they have the #1 mattress brand. I mean, Stearns & Foster is America's favorite mattress. Here's why.
Standard.
It's the gold standard. It's America's favorite mattress. They've been around for over 100 years. Did you know that? They know what they're doing when it comes to mattresses, and you can find a mattress that works for you. It's going to work for your body and your budget. And do yourself a favor. There's no reason why you should be waking up not feeling like you slept. So go to Golden-Fowler Furnishings on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City, and this is what they prescribe every day in their store. Rest, live, repeat. That's what it is. That's what you're supposed to do.
Mattress doulas on staff. So it'll get you right into where you need to be.
I love it. Thank you so much. Welcome back to Currently. We're going to be shifting gears here. Lots of news this week, Beth, about Safe Harbor, some decisions that the City Commission made about Safe Harbor going year-round. And then, some decisions that were made about the Pines, which was an encampment. I mean, it's not a lawful encampment. It's not a real campground, but lots and lots of people, unhoused people, were living at the Pines at some point. So why don't we kind of go back and talk about Safe Harbor and the decision to make this year-round?
Sure. So city commissioners on Monday unanimously approved a new special land use permit for Safe Harbor. That permit will allow Safe Harbor to operate during the summer months. So right now, it typically has operated year-round from October to May. So it was not allowed to operate in the summer under its old permit. It now can. And that was intentional. The last several months, Safe Harbor has been preparing for this transition. They've been lining up community funding. It's really being positioned as a 2-year pilot with the main goal of alleviating the situation at the Pines. And that 2-year time period is also meant to buy time for community leaders to work together. There's a newly formed community task force that's going to be looking at longer term solutions, which could include the possibility of another offsite location, perhaps one a little bit out of the city center. That maybe would have a larger campus for some type of shelter operation, and also just other options like more permanent supportive housing.
Right.
So that was unanimously approved. The Traverse City Police Department then the following day, and particularly Wednesday, then began its enforcement of the city's no camping ordinance. Okay. So there was a ban on camping in city parks. The city has not enforced that for the last year or two. They've sort of allowed the Pines to operate because they knew the individuals there didn't really have anywhere else to go. There were benefits to having a centralized location, like you could bring support services and food. The police knew where everyone was at, and they weren't spread across multiple parks. So there were benefits to that. There were also downsides, which certainly would be, impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods, residences, businesses. Also, that many individuals struggling in one location had a lot of, behavioral challenges. There were fires. There were a lot of issues. I think what everyone agreed on, there was a lot of compassion for the people who were there and wanting to try to connect them to whatever options or services that they could get. But also really feeling like the Pines was unsustainable, not livable, not humane. The conditions there were not great. I mean, people are essentially living in the forest without real infrastructure or support. So Wednesday, multiple agencies, multiple police departments, local authorities partnered together, went into the Pines. Residents had already been moving out over the last week or two because they knew this enforcement was coming. They had been warned that they were going to be enforcing the no camping rules there. So the last, approximately 10 to a dozen people were cleared out on Wednesday morning. Many of those folks will be going to Safe Harbor for the summer. Some are going to the homes of friends or family members. Some are moving out of Traverse City. There will likely be, some who, for a variety of reasons, still try to camp either there or at other properties. And that's going to be an ongoing issue for the Traverse City Police Department to handle. They do have the ability to issue citations to, if needed, arrest individuals for trespassing. But I will just say again that everyone I've spoken with, including authorities, have really approached this issue from a compassion, not a crackdown standpoint. They don't want folks at the Pines because it's not safe, but they're not trying to just throw people in jail. They're trying, if possible, to get them connected to services.
I mean, I think we've talked about this even on the 14 episodes. We've touched on it a few times, and over the years that you've been a journalist, we've been covering the issue of homelessness in this area for quite a while, and this is a problem without an easy solution. While we're moving people into a year-round shelter that is at the Safe Harbor at this point, that's not necessarily ideal for a lot of neighbors and the neighborhoods at Safe Harbor at this point. But, this is just a step in another direction. This is not the final answer. And I know there's a lot of myths and stigma surrounding homelessness. And for me, I like to remind people that it's extremely layered and complex. At the end of the day, it's housing that ends homelessness, no matter how you look at it. So we'll continue to talk about housing. It's a key issue here in Northwest Michigan. But another key issue is roads.
That's true.
And boy, we've talked about roads for a very long time as well.
People have a lot of opinions about.
They have a ton of opinions about. You had a story about what is the possibility of getting two roads in Traverse City fixed. One is 14th Street and one is Frankie Road. And I personally want to set up a camera on these streets and just capture the way people are driving to avoid these giant potholes. It feels like it's like watching Frogger, but you're driving the frog. And you're like, this way, that way.
And I know you guys are both West Siders, so you probably deal with those roads fairly often. I mean, they're pretty located to town, so most of us have to use them at some point or another. But yeah, what's notable is I hadn't seen these two roads on the list of city or county projects this year. So I was like, I wanted to just ask on behalf of readers, because every time we do a road story, people comment about these two roads.
Say 14th Street.
Yeah.
So I called the folks who know and just said, when are these roads going to be fixed?
Right.
What can we tell people? So 14th Street, the city is looking at a temporary solution for this year. They did mention it's one of the lowest rated condition corridors in the city. One thing that I think it's helpful for folks to understand is there are a lot of constraints. Usually the issue of a road being fixed isn't that the municipality doesn't know it needs to be fixed. Like, they're not blind to the fact that 14th Street's in bad shape. There are funding constraints. There are timing constraints and staffing constraints. There are also typically, especially in the city of Traverse City, and this is the case with 14th Street, there are utilities that surround that corridor. So 14th, for example, has a water main that's running underneath the road. If they're going to tear that road up, they want to at the same time replace the water main.
Sure.
Because you can only imagine what the comment section would look like if you fix a road and then 5 years later you tear it up, and then you get all this is government bureaucracy. Why doesn't anything work the way it's supposed to? But utilities are also expensive. So then you're adding more costs and trying to get everything aligned at the right time. So for people on 14th, I will just say that the city is looking at doing their own internal paving project this year, essentially using their own equipment, at least getting a surface down that can get it through the next couple of years. There's more funding supposed to be coming in 2028 for a bigger fix. And then long-term in that corridor, just similar to 8th Street, the long-term goal is to completely reconstruct 14th Street. So that redesign that whole corridor, it could look like different streetscaping, maybe medians in the middle. There's a plan to have a trail that would connect the Boorman Lake Loop Trail to the village at Grand Traverse Commons that would run parallel to 14th. So potential temporary fix this year ahead of longer term fixes to come.
I think they should add like one of those, like you have in the airport where it's like a walking, treadmill. We're always talking about walking trails, but what if you get tired? Maybe one that moves for you. I think it's a good idea.
Just like running,
bring your suitcase, sit down, right to the airport. That'd be perfect.
And same thing, just real quickly with Frankie Road, which is one that people ask us about all the time. That's because a lot of people use it. I talked to TCAPS about this because 14th, they've got Glen Limits, they've got Thirlby Field, they've got facilities there, but you can get to those through the neighborhoods.
Yes.
The Montessori school you can only get to on Frankie Road. So you have to use that road. It has a ton of, potholes. There's the mire there, of course.
Right.
And a lot of students crossing Frankie because a lot of parents will park in the mire side and then the kids cross the road. It's also the Beta stop is on that side. There's no bus service to Montessori, so a lot of kids take the Beta bus. So that's another one. Right now, the plan is to fix that road in 2026. So we have to deal with it for another summer. But I will say at the same time, TCAPS is also working to get Safe Routes to School funding to put a crosswalk in with flashing lights there between the Montessori and Meyer, and maybe doing some safety upgrades. So those could both be coming to that.
I went to West Middle School, and we just like rolled down the hill to get to Meyer. Like there was no safety about it.
Well, there used to be the bowling alley there too, so you'd walk to the bowling alley. Yeah, so.
Absolutely.
Fixes to come.
Back in the day, my friends.
Don't forget Piggyville.
Which
they call that little neighborhood behind there. And I was told that there used to be a slaughterhouse where the Great Wolf Lodge is.
That's why they call it
Piggyville got its name.
Nice.
Time was.
Just a fun fact for the kids on the water slide.
Yeah, exactly.
This all used to be dead
Piggyville.
animals.
This was all an abattoir.
There are lots of pigs here, friends. We're gonna end the show with one story that I have to say, Beth, you broke this story. Some of the details are still under wraps at this point, but it's a food and wine festival that is coming to Traverse City. And just judging by some of the social media comments right now, people have opinions about adding another festival to our summer season.
They do.
Tell us about this Food and Wine Fest, though.
Yeah. So we did. We got a kind of an exclusive in the ticker about this. This is Traverse City Tourism is hosting a new event called Traverse City Food and Wine, August 21st through 23rd. It is essentially intended to somewhat fill the gap left by the Traverse City Film Festival, which ended several years ago and used to be in late July to early August. But also an event. We've had a couple stop and start culinary events that have sort of fizzled out. Traverse City Tourism obviously has more funding, more infrastructure. They kind of have the runway to commit to an event long term and to do it. So the idea is that there would be these different tasting experiences happening at local farms, restaurants, wineries, breweries, etc. And then Saturday, August 23rd would be the big event, which is called the Grand Tasting in the Open Space. That will have businesses, book sales, vendors, live music, craft beverage samples, bites of local food. The idea, and this is where more details are to come, I think they're going to be holding a press conference on Monday and maybe revealing some of the talent. I know they're trying to bring some nationally known chefs to Traverse City, maybe have a National Writer Series event where Doug Stan interviews a big famous cookbook author, something along those lines. So that talent hasn't been announced yet, but the festival and the dates have. So if you're a foodie, there's more to come. I will say that the story touched on the fact that August is a little bit of a challenging time. Many of us who are here know it's already busy, already hard to get into some of the, restaurants or wineries. But Traverse City Tourism told me that really that time, especially mid to late August, is for them a slump. Hotel rooms start to go down. Air traffic starts to go down because many families are returning home and getting ready for the start of the school year. So especially without a TC Film Festival or Iron Man, which has moved out to Frankfurt, they're trying to find some kind of event that will keep those hotel rooms booked and the air traffic coming.
So, really, for high-impact event, though, you're talking about a one-day event that will bring people to the open space. Otherwise, it is happening all across the region, really.
Yeah, and they do have that open space held for Thursday and Friday if they are able to book some celebrities or something like that. But right now, Saturday is, the main event.
Okay, well, that's, I love food. Yeah. I love wine.
Is there going to be any paella?
Art's referring to, there used to be an old school event called Paella in the Park. Some folks might remember back in the day. So yeah, more details to come. There could be.
There could be. Awesome. Well, thank you for covering that story. And I always appreciate all the comments in the comment section. You just really get to know what people think.
For better or worse.
A lot of fun.
Yes, you do.
Hey, we are back next week. We're going to have a great show. Aubrey Parker, editor of the Betsy Current, is going to be here. Love that. Be sure to subscribe to the show on all the platforms at crystalfrost.com. It's super easy. You just go there. You can subscribe. You can also follow us on social media. We're everywhere. You can subscribe to Currently with Crystal Frost wherever you get your podcasts. So, Spotify and all the other ones. You can also watch the full show on YouTube and Facebook. Currently is a Compass local podcast produced by Pancake Boy Productions. Big thanks to our lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, in addition to the wonderful West Shore Bank and, of course, the Coin Slot. Now, before we go and we play a little pinball, what are you looking forward to in the coming week? Art, you go first.
I get to write a story, so I like writing the stories the most. The interviews are fun. Today at Amicall, I gathered 5 servers with 150 total years of serving experience in town. Wow. And so we had a really, really fun cover shoot. Meg Bowen took some shots for that. So I'm very excited to sit down and write that story. It's basically a focus on people that do this as a career and what they experienced. And it was like so many other stories. You go in with a set of questions, interviewing people, and it just goes in so many different directions, things that you didn't even have on your radar. And I love, it's rare that I do it, but I love to get everybody together round table style because it just feeds off of each other and you get all this stuff that you wouldn't otherwise get. So I get to write that story, and I'm excited to do so.
That's exciting. That is exciting. And also, I've been a server. I know you've been a server. We talk a lot about the food and the incredible quality of food that we have here. But you can have the best food in the world, and if you have terrible service, you won't remember how good the food was.
Yeah.
You just won't.
And it's a nice mix of folks, too, because I have some upscale, some more casual, and they're all kind of OG places in town. So it's
I love it.
it's going to be a fun story to write.
That's fantastic.
And then you can look for it in your Traverse City Business News. Did I mention
We'll have
that?
to have you back to talk about that one.
Yes. What about you, Beth?
I'm going to plug 2 events that are both happening in the NMC campus. Sure. So I'm on the Extended Education Advisory Board, and today, Friday, when the episode comes out, it's Campus Day.
Nice.
When a bunch of people come to campus and take extended ed classes, and I will be there introducing some of them and saying hi to everyone, which will be great. And then Tuesday, so it might be a little tight for you to catch that today, but Tuesday is the TCAAPI night. It's going to be at the Denos, and it's with Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist Taro Yamasaki. Our friend Sakura from Rotary is going to be interviewing him. There are local Asian-owned restaurants that provide food. The food is fantastic. So you get some food, you hang out in the museum, sculpture court, and then you go into Milligan and have this event.
That's amazing.
It's so good. Last year, it was such a great event, different guest. But, I just come have some great food and have a great conversation at the Denos.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah. Well, it's Mother's Day on Sunday.
And
And
your card in the mail.
Selfishly, I'm just looking forward as a mother to being treated like a queen, as I should be every day.
Fair.
All right.
To Jordan.
Now let's go play some pinball. How about it?
Sounds great.
Let's do it. What is your favorite Northern Michigan beach? And I'm going to have Beth go first.
Okay, I'm going to say 2 in Leland. First of all, everyone has a secret beach. If they don't tell, I will not say it on this podcast, but everyone has one. My non-secret beaches, I would say Vans Beach in Leland and Good Harbor.
I'm not going to tell the secret beach. I do like Esch Road. Do a lot of beach bonfires out there. It used to be that secret, but a little bit under the radar. Not that anymore.
Too many people told on podcasts.
Too many people had beach bonfires and posted group shots.
Right.
That was not helpful either.
My favorite beach is Crystal Lake Beach.
Okay.
For obvious reasons. Yeah. Even though my name is spelled differently. Thanks, Mom.